And violence in Russia's southern republics has been on the rise since spring. A counter-terrorism operation is underway in the woods of the border between Ingushetia and Chechnya. To gain a wider perspective of the fight against terrorism, we are now joined live by our correspondent, Alyona Minkovsky, who is in Washington, D.C. Hello to Alyona. The war on terrorism has been a top priority for the U.S., but despite a military campaign in Afghanistan of almost 8 years, militant groups appear to still be operating successfully.
That's right. Well, first we're talking about this recent suicide bombing attack in Ingushetia just a few days ago, and that's just one of many of recent attacks in the Caucasus region lately. But as you mentioned, lately there also has been an upsurge of terrorist attacks and violence in both Afghanistan and Iraq, coming from supposedly different groups. But with all this violence, we must ask if there might be some kind of link between them, or if it's simply just coincidence. Now, here to discuss this more with me is Dr. Walid Fares from the Foundation for the Freedom of Democracies. Thank you, for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
So first, I would like your opinion. Do you think that there might be some kind of a link between all of these attacks?
When international observers look at a series of attacks, including the ones in the Caucasus against Russian and other targets, one would think first of domestic local reasons, but then when you talk about suicide bombing, that has an ideological origin. So that gives you an indication that this may be of jihadist Salafist, Al-Qaeda-like, not necessarily the organization. And then, as you said in the intro, it is also happening in other places, you know, from Afghanistan, Pakistan to Iraq. We look second at what is the chatter level, what is the chatting actually among and between those organizations, because there were no press releases issued. Maybe we're going to see a press release issue. The method is the one of the jihadist Salafists. The claim that we have seen on the Salafi chat rooms is revenge against Russia, which is occupying these lands and so on. So we think most likely that there is a regional link between the operations being done in the Caucasus and the mentors, the ideological mentors who are encouraging them from outside the region.
Also, can we assume that if attacks are increasing, that there must be some kind of a new funding coming up there? Is there anyone that we could point to say that really is funding this across the board?
Well, once you see more than one operation in a very short period of time, multiple dimensions targeting officials and especially suicide car bombing, then you're talking about a higher level of funding. And then you are talking about possibility that that funding, which was not found locally, otherwise it would have happened before, may have been sent from overseas. Most recently, U.S. Ambassador Holbrooke, envoyed to the region, clearly said that some of the funding is coming from the Gulf to Afghanistan and Pakistan, funding not the governments, but private funding and ideological funding. So there would be a lead there for the Russians to look at as well.
And so what can be done about that? Is there any way to find the source of that funding and, you know, perhaps deal with it somehow?
Well, that's going to be the most difficult. The United States, the Europeans have been handling the situation, will continue to handle that situation. India, for example, has been tackling since Mumbai's attacks, including in the Arab and Muslim world. The funding is going to be the most difficult because it may not be a regime, but it may be circles within a regime who have an ideological agenda. You may find one person, then the link will break with the other person, but certainly Russian authorities have enough resources to engage along with the international partners in going after the funding, because it may be that this funding is behind attacks in multiple places, including Russia.
And can Russia in any way look to the U.S. and maybe learn from them or try to deal with the situation in the same way, since the U.S. has been in Afghanistan dealing with this for so long now?
Well, we are assuming that the Russian-American cooperation amidst all the other tensions, but that cooperation allowing U.S. Logistical support going through Russian territory, through Afghanistan, is coming at the heel of some sort of Russian-American understanding that Al-Qaeda-type groups, Salafi-type groups, are a threat to both the United States and Russia and to their allies in the region. Well, yes, of course, the Americans in Afghanistan and Iraq have learned a lot. But Russian experience with that type of terrorism in the Caucasus, even from the time of the Soviet Union through the 90s, is significant. I think putting together this information with the two superpowers of the world would be a good thing to do at this point in time.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, and we will continue to discuss this, as unfortunately it seems like the terrorist attacks are becoming more and more frequent these days. Now back to you in Moscow.
Well, thank you, Alena. That was RT correspondent Alena Minkowski, and Dr. Wale Faris, director of the Future Terrorism Project at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy.